include it as a unanimous vote. So
We'll adjust that then.
Councillors, just to draw your attention to an error in the, it's actually the report, not the minutes, in relation to Memorial Hall. On reflection, and looking through the committee guidelines, in our advisory committees, unlike in a council meeting, people who have a conflict of interest or are a member of an organisation that has a matter before them can actually participate in the discussion and the debate. Apologies for if there was any misunderstanding in relation to that. I think we're all, particularly around this table, are very cognizant of the fact that if we have a conflict of interest, we have to make a declaration, and if it's a pecuniary interest, we have to leave. The assumption was made that applied to committees as well, but on reflection, no, it doesn't. In the committees, they are able to do that. So the suggestion in the body of that report was to counsel the people involved. That will not be happening. Certainly I'll be attending their next meeting and just explaining that directly to them.
So Cameron.
Yeah, could I just follow up on that? Thank you very much for that statement, because I think that's really good. I'd just like to also make the point that it wasn't an easy meeting, and I'd like to congratulate Councillor Turner for the chairing of that meeting. I think you did a great job, and I think you ran it really well.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Okay, so we're back to the adoption of the minutes, the amendment. Councillor Abbey, Councillor Potham. Any discussion? Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. Item 5, the mayoral minute. I'll move the recommendation. Have a seconder?
It's not needed, but I will.
Thanks, Councillor Turner. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
I think I mentioned recently that I was preparing some information to put into that submission. I'd like to thank a couple of councillors, Councillor Turner, Burgess, for giving me some input. I haven't finished that off at the moment, but I'd like to try and get it in tomorrow. I'd also like to I think recently we had a submission going in on the regional transport plan, and that came to council beforehand, and it was really good to have a look at that and see that it was a really good submission. I know that can't happen with this one because there's a deadline at the end of March, but I would like to see that submission come back to council just to see.
At a later date.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Any further discussion?
just a quick one to say that I think this is very much on the pulse of what our community would like us to do as representatives. There's a lot of concern in the community, particularly after the closure of Westpac. There's been a lot of conversations over the last decade of whether or not council should be actively courting alternative banking communities to come to Yass, such as the Bendigo Bank style and the more community orientated banks. So I think it's something that, from an economic development perspective, could be something that council should look at. We don't want to undermine the numbers that keep the banks here, but I think we also need to look to our community's future because we are a growing community, and the pressures of having these banking services end up at the post office is problematic. If you've ever tried to get service in the post office, they do a great job, but they're also under a lot of pressure. And at some point we have to decide when is a post office not a post office and it's a bank. Because a lot of banking organisations are sending their customers to the post office for that face-to-face service.
Through Mr. Mayor, we met with Bendigo Bank a couple of months ago. It seems that the goalposts have changed even for them. So the size of your savings, if you like, or deposits from the local community is significantly higher than what it was when they went to Bullewa. So even the community banks are now changing their approach as well, which is a little sad.
So always someone left out of the equation, isn't there? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried.
Through Mr. Mayor, we've got a late report that just needs to be accepted into the meeting and dealt with towards the end of the meeting. It's in relation to a tender. The reason for its urgency is that we need to get moving so we don't miss the construction season. It's still related to some roadworks. We can't do the roadworks unless we get the supply of materials. So that's the reason for its urgency. So we appreciate if that could be accepted into the meeting as late business.
Someone like to move? Councillor Burgess, Councillor Turner. Any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6.1, amended housekeeping proposal. Someone like to move? Councillor Cochrane. Have a second? Councillor Turner. Any discussion? Comments?
I have a question.
Yes. Councillor Jones.
If we could just get some clarification on what private recreational use is and how this impacts on this lot and what we do with it or what we don't do with it.
Very good question.
Just gonna need to get the LEP up.
You don't know it all off by heart.
What?
Oh.
Yeah, I know, I am a disappointment.
With private recreation? Okay, certainly I'm familiar with some private recreation facilities in a zone that way. In Goulburn, one of the clubs runs the rugby ground and the hockey grounds. And because they're effectively a private organisation, not a public agency, a public organisation, they're classified as private recreation, even though the public go there.
All happy?
Sorry, doing the motion that Julie sent round or?
Oh, yes, you sent around an amended one, yes.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Where?
Is that it? Yeah.
Okay,
Do you want me to
all
explain?
clear?
Yeah.
Clarification? Yes.
Yeah. So how does this what does this mean it can be used for? Like, specifically on this location.
Swings?
Yeah, so the private recreation zone, the objectives are to enable land to be used for private open space or recreational purposes, a range of recreational settings and activities and compatible land uses, protect and enhance the natural environment for recreational purposes. So it's a very limited land use table. So it's things like camping grounds, caravan parks, community facilities, recreation areas, facilities and that sort of thing. The issue is with the land is that both parcels are privately owned and we were proposing to rezone them to C3 environmental management because of the flood constraints over the land. The Department of Planning were concerned around the ability to subdivide dwelling entitlements and that sort of thing. So in discussions with them, they recommended it's RE1 at the moment to move it to RE2. I think like the likelihood of some of these uses coming up, like they've got to be compatible with the flood constraints of the land. Plus they are on the smaller side in terms of parcels. Yeah. So just so council's aware, you did consider this amendment to the LEP at your meeting in November.
Okay, any further questions? Prepared to vote? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6.2. Consent DA 200200151. There is a recommendation. Councillor Jones, seconded Councillor Burgess. Any questions, any comments? Councillor Cameron.
I'd just like to make a quick comment. This whole proposal about the quarry, myself and another councillor voted against this proposal initially, and I know this is a different issue, this VPA, but I think we were arguing at that time that there was a lot of traffic and a lot of fill, and I actually think that I'll be voting still against this voluntary PA because I don't think there's enough money being paid in response to those issues.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron. Councillor Jones.
I said I was gonna keep it brief, we're gonna get out of
No, you're not.
Look, what we're doing tonight is ensuring that none of our ratepayers pay for the legal costs of a developer. So, while you might disagree with the quarry and the amount of money that we're pulling out of the contributions for road use, I don't think we should exacerbate it by passing that cost on to anyone else. Thank you.
Ready to vote? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Cameron against? 6.3, development application 210-293, residential subdivision, Sutton Road, Sutton. There's a recommendation.
Happy to move.
Councillor Jones. You have a seconder?
Yeah.
Councillor Jones, Councillor Burgess. Any discussion? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I have some concerns about this development in the great village of Sutton. One of the reasons why I'm concerned about it is about drainage problems. Talking to people around Yass, I've dealt with a number of drainage problems going back to developments that are 20 years old to 10 years old, and on two occasions on these two different developments. And suddenly, because of maybe it's climate change, maybe it's just bad weather, I'd like to think it's the former, but drainage problems are occurring much later than when the assessments are done initially. And I'm very concerned about drainage. When you read through the attachment, there's a couple of things that sort of stand out to me that I think are, I won't say they're red flags, but they're yellow flags. And I think the one that strikes me first of all is the fact that 5 of the blocks are adjacent to an infrequent watercourse. Now that's 5 out of 17, and nearly a third. An infrequent watercourse, I would imagine that some of the things that happened in August here and in was probably an infrequent watercourse, and they were major sort of problems. So that's the first yellow flag that I saw. The second one was a comment by the SES that the main entrance and surrounding roads to this planned subdivision may be susceptible to inundation, which would limit evacuation to the growing population in the area. So that's 2 things. The third thing was that the SES has a flood development plan manual, and I wondered whether we had been whether this had been used in relationship to this particular development. And the other point that sort of occurs to me with Sutton is that not far from this development, up the hill, across Sutton Road, is another big development. And it's, I think, 49 blocks or something like that. And they're very large blocks, very expensive blocks, by the way, too. But if you have a look at to the right of Sutton Road, as you're heading towards the village, it's sort of up on a hill. And this other development is further down. And it seems to me that one of the questions that I was thinking about as I went past it a couple of times, I've been over to Sutton a number of times, that, where's the water going from that development? And it would seem to me as though some of that water, and I'm not saying the water from the houses per se, but maybe from the road development within that Woodbury Ridge estate, might be heading down towards the other development. And so I'm sort of wondering whether that development has been looked at in terms of the possible drainage impact on the development that's in front of us at the moment. The final point I'd just like to make is I was having a bit of a look through it, and I can ask the director about this. Are there footpaths planned in this particular development? I couldn't see that was clearly indicated, and Yass Valley Council does have a pedestrian access mobility plan, and I was wondering how that fitted in as well. So I've put up a foreshadowed motion that the DA be deferred to the April council meeting in order to answer these issues fully. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Cameron.
Through you, Mayor, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Sure. So I've written down the points, so hopefully I cover what you've requested, Councillor Cameron. So firstly, in relation to flood, this particular site has been subject of a planning proposal and specific flood modelling for this property. And that was dealt with through the planning proposal between council, the consultant who prepared the floodplain risk management plan and study for council, and BCT Flood, which is the state government agency. I myself did attend some of those meetings. And obviously the opinion's been formed that the development could proceed on the basis of the flood impacts. Our assessment is, in particularly in relation to the access, and the comment in the SES letter is that the developer will be required to address the access in the subdivision work certificate, and that the access must comply with council's floodplain risk management study and plan.
Okay.
So I'm satisfied with the advice that's been provided. So secondly, the floodplain development manual, which I'll just comment on that briefly. That's actually, it's not an SES document, it's a New South Wales, like state government BCD document. It's been around for a long time. It guides the preparation of the flood studies and the floodplain risk management studies and plans. So when we refer back to, when we're assessing flood impacts, we consider the requirements of our floodplain risk management study and plan, and the information that is within the requirements we need to consider under our LEP. Again, I'm satisfied that that has occurred. In terms of footpaths, my memory of reading the development application is that there are requirements for footpaths along Majura Lane and Guys Street, and I think that is satisfactory. And stormwater generally, I'll just make a comment. We did have a peak in stormwater complaints last year, but we also had a peak in rainfall. Generally, when we have normal rainfall patterns, we don't get anywhere near the complaints that we receive. We received probably for the majority of last year, I would say. They've definitely tapered off since the rains stopped. That rain was unseasonal, and I don't think you can give a guarantee that stormwater systems that are designed would necessarily be able to cope with that particular peak of rainfall. They're only designed to a certain point to cater for a certain amount of rainfall. That's the general principle.
That's
So I've got a question. So your answer in regard to the footpath is that it's on the outside, but not within the development itself?
No, but it's a cul-de-sac development. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 8 or 9 lots that feed onto the cul-de-sac, and the rest of them have direct access onto Majura Lane and Guys Street. I think the requirement for the footpath on that Majura Lane and Guys Street is appropriate.
Oh.
I don't necessarily, like if count, I'm not with you, that you need it in the cul-de-sac, like you've only got a limited number of lots facing the cul-de-sac.
Right.
So you're not going to have high levels of traffic.
Right, okay. But yeah, I'm probably positioning that with developments in the future, wherever they are, that we should really have footpaths, because one of the things that's missing a little bit in Yass itself is the lack of footpaths in numerous areas, and to the detriment of people who are, like my good self, ageing, plus the other people who have got children and prams and and all the mobility scooters and all of those sorts of things. Now, I take your point that it's only a small area, but it sort of does concern me a bit.
So through you, Mr Mayor, council does have a pedestrian and mobility plan.
Yeah.
So for the implementation of footpaths, and like in most new developments where they're required, we do ask for them. And in certain developments, say for example the Montessori preschool here in Yass, they've been
Yeah.
asked to provide a section of footpath in relation to their development.
Yeah, okay, so
We've also had feedback from some rural communities.
Yeah.
That don't want footpaths. They,
Yeah.
obviously because of the low density nature and the distances to travel, they don't all want footpaths.
I accept your point, but
I've got two in my street. If you want one, you can have one, because most people walk down the middle of the road.
and yes, that's not a good idea if you're in a wheelchair though, but I just want.
Wheelchairs are the worst people.
Okay, well, the point that I'm making is that I just think that we need to be aware that people do need footpaths on
Yeah,
occasion. But this is not a low density rural development by the look of it.
Through you,
Yes,
Mr Mayor, look, you're talking at 5,000 square metre lots and upwards, so
all right,
I
okay.
wouldn't say it's a high density.
I agree with urban area footpaths.
Yeah.
Lots of, 5,000 square metres.
Yeah.
And even retrospectively now in Murray Bateman, as we were bigger, now we're getting tighter, we're getting footpaths now later on.
Yeah.
So it's not that they can't be added later if things change.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that who pays for it then? When you're retrofitting it's not the developers.
I see your point.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Through you, Mr Mayor, just a quick point to, on the items raised in the submissions, I'd like to acknowledge that the planning team have addressed the conditions in terms of dust suppression and also what was raised about the landscaping and creating that sense of arrival and also screening, that not only has that condition been included, but also our team have included a legal mechanism there for the long-term maintenance of those trees, so well done, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Jones. Any further discussion? Further questions? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Cameron against. Okay, we'll move right on to 6.4. BA 220304, fuel occupancy, Murray Bateman, Port Close.
Happy to move.
Councillor Jones, moved Councillor Jones. Seconded Councillor Buck. Discussion?
I'd like to just speak in support of the recommendation. But firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge that I know that change is hard. I personally have been fortunate enough to have a beautiful outscape from my property for the last 11 years, and shortly I'm about to have a subdivision to look onto with the minimum lot size of 750 square metre houses if they're all subdivided. So, you know, at first I was really annoyed, as, you know, of course I would be, but a wise counsellor, and I won't name names, said something that really resonated with me. And that's, we all only own our own patch of land. You know, as long as it's legal, we can do whatever we want with our patch of land, but I can't tell my neighbour what colour to paint their front door just because I don't like what their front door is, you know, painted. So I believe the concerns raised in the submissions have been adequately addressed by council. My major concern was the variation of the front setback. And I trust that council, you know, considered this and verified this. And for me, I don't feel like I need to know any more nitty-gritty details on that particular subject matter. Everyone that bought into Broughton Circuit knew that there could be dual occupancy on any of those lots. This is what this is, so it shouldn't come as a major surprise to anyone. In regard to the building not keeping in the spirit of the aesthetics of the estate, my thoughts on this is that the building will not obstruct any views, it won't block any light. It's just a standard looking single story dwelling. And I believe that we should be more concerned with keeping in the spirit of sharing the burden of the cost of living with family or others, as everyone is just doing it too tough at the moment. So I support this recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Butler. Councillor Cameron.
Yeah. Thanks for those comments. I'm sure there'll be plenty of footpaths to look on as well. I'm going to oppose it simply on the grounds that two things. I'm not happy that actions were taken by the people putting this forward without approval. It seems as though to me that they were taking it into their own hands and sort of trying to present it as a bit of a fait accompli. That could be one reading of it. I may be wrong. They may have made a mistake and not be aware of what was required of them. But putting up fences and putting in driveways seems to be sort of saying we're going to do this whether you like it or not. Whether it's subdivision by stealth, as mentioned by a number of people, I'm not against dual occupancy, but I think there were some indications in some of the submissions that were sent in that it didn't look like what we would normally expect dual occupancy to look like, i.e. the houses being relatively close together and being part of it. So I'm voting against it.
Thank you, councillor Cameron. Any further discussion, councillor Turner?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I must say I'm always uncomfortable about dual occupancy. It appears to be something that was thrust upon us in order to solve problems in Western Sydney without any idea as to what the impact was in rural ventures. I'm uncomfortable with it as a general principle, and I'm uncomfortable with it in this particular case, and I would be supporting my colleague across there and voting against it.
Thank you, councillor Cameron. Further discussion?
Do you need to?
Do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I can just clarify a few things. So, the dual occupancy is permissible in the zone. The area of the lot is just over 2 hectares and the minimum lot size is 2 hectares, so they can't actually lodge another development application for the subdivision of the land. In terms of the setbacks, we've made an assessment of the setbacks, and just to clarify, I've done my own site inspection out there this morning, and there are a variety of setbacks in that subdivision, and some are closer, I would think, than 20 metres, and you've also got in places sheds in front of dwellings. In terms of how it looks from the road, I don't think, unless you were looking for dual occupancies, I don't think you'd necessarily pick that it was a dual occupancy. And dual occupancy does take a variety of forms. And just in relation to the driveway, that's been addressed in the development application and the draft consent which is attached. And generally we don't take into consideration compliance matters when we're determining development applications. You determine the development application that's before you.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Turner and Councillor Cameron against. Declare the motion carried.
You do sometimes vote against your directors. See? He's not as loyal as you think.
Broad shoulders.
You told us how loyal he was last time.
Yes. Unless there is a very good reason.
Thank you,
Reason I'm very uncomfortable with.
Okay, moving right along. 6.5, terms of reference, Murrumbateman Playground Project Committee. And there is a recommendation.
So
Councillor
I'm happy
Turner.
to move that way.
Move councillor Turner, second councillor Potten.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd like to recommend to councillors straight out of the gate, please. If I could recommend Mike Reid and Kristen Butler as the first two councillors.
Councillor Mike Reid and councillor Kristen Butler.
I'm happy to throw my hat in the ring too, if you so wish.
should ask that Mike's happy with the nomination.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Ryan.
Turn the sound down on purpose.
So with councillor Jones has nominated councillor Reid and councillor Butler. Someone like to, how are we going to deal with the third one?
Mr Mayor, I'm a great believer in accepting volunteers, and I believe the Deputy Mayor just volunteered.
So we have 3 nominations.
And there's a certain perverse logic in having 2 members who represent Murray-Bateman on the Murray-Bateman committee.
It does seem to be a rather good fit,
Rather
doesn't it?
much, yes.
Okay, councillor Cameron?
Point of order, councillor Turner, they don't represent Murray-Bateman per se, they represent the Yass Valley.
Correct.
Just want to make that, thank you.
Quite right, councillor Cameron. Okay, we prepared to vote then?
No.
No?
So I've got, I want to raise a couple of concerns about the committee. The first one is that I'm concerned that the committee only has three representatives from the community, and I presume the community is Murray-Bateman. I think that's not a very big number, and I think quite a number of other action committees, whether it was the Main Street Committee or the Open Spaces Committee, had more community members on it than 3, and I think 3 is very, very limited. So that's one of my concerns at the moment. The other thing is that, and we have been discussing this previously at another meeting, but I still don't really get, there's a couple of questions that I have. One is, how is this committee going to work? Because it seems to be that we're going to go back to having a number of consultants. Well, this is what I'm asking. Are we having a number of consultants work with this committee at substantial cost? And I think the cost was quoted the other day somewhere between 150 and 200,000. So that's another question that I have, because that's going to eat into any grant of 750,000 that we may have initially. We may get further grants, so I understand that. I'm also not clear on the timeline about this particular committee. Has it got a limited timeline of 1 year, 2 years? I think we've got to be upfront about what that timeline may look like, and I know there are some other factors. And the other thing that I was sort of looking at was, how does it relate to the grant timeline? Like, this is a federal grant that was raised by some of the community members and councillors, or councillor, I'm not sure how accurate I am on that. What's that timeline looking like? My impression is that some of those, if you don't get moving very quickly, you don't get things started within, say, a limited period, and I'm thinking that the period may be less than a year, maybe 6 months, and that's why I've asked the other question about the possible timeline. So how does it relate to the grant timeline? So I'm after a bit of information at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go?
3 years.
Sorry, Director.
Sorry?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's my last report, so I'm on the agenda. So in terms of the size of the project committee, that's a recommendation to council. If council would like to make it larger, that's your prerogative. We were looking on the smaller side of project committees, using the community reps as touchstones for the work that we're doing, because we do plan to do a fairly extensive community consultation throughout this process. In terms of consultants, look, we're going to have to use consultants because the complexity of the design of the playground, and I think just even doing constraints analysis and selecting the sites needs specialist assistance. And yes, I think I did quote those figures the other night, and my intention is to put a budget bid, and that'll come to council, and council can make a decision about whether or not it funds that particular item. I'd also suggest that as part of that consultancy that they undertake the community consultation as well. terms of the grant timeline, I'll have to take that on notice. I'm pretty sure the application doesn't need to be in until August. So it's quite, I think that's correct, it's quite a long timeline to get the application completed, but I could be wrong. So I'll have to come back to you on that. However, regardless of how council moves forward with this project, we've got a 6 to 9 month lead in. By the time you do constraints analysis, do the consultation, identify the site, and do the consultation around the design, not 9 months, 12 months, that's a substantial piece of work that needs to be done. Because we're nowhere near agreement with the Murray Bateman community around where the park should go, what the park should look like. So all that work needs to be completed, and that's why we want the project committee to help guide council to make decisions around how to proceed. Have I answered all your questions? One?
Yeah, but you sort of haven't, we're not quite sure. Sorry, I should be saying, the question that sort of raises in my mind is, I thought, let me be frank, I thought we had the money.
No.
No, we do, but we don't.
We've got a committee, Mr Mayor.
Sorry.
The way the program works is that my understanding is that the federal government gave each electorate an amount of money for the local member to determine what project the money would go to, or what projects the money would go to. It didn't bypass the budgetary processes or the processes for making application. So even though the money was granted for a all activities playground, we still have to apply for money that's already been promised for the project. And that's the way the federal government grant program works. So we still have to apply.
Yeah, sounds odd.
Even though we have been promised the money.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got it's a convoluted way. I would have thought that if a minister made an announcement that the money was to go to a playground, that's what we would be doing, and we wouldn't have to apply. The cheque would be in the mail. But that's not how governments work, unfortunately.
Thank you for that answer.
I'll just mention, yeah.
Could I clarify something? Sorry. Could I just clarify something? In terms of the constitution of the committee, I tend to agree with Councillor Cameron that we do seem to have not a very good representation from the community. However, the Progress Association has formed a committee which is very representative of the community, and they're doing surveys. So, excuse me, I think I'm having my wife's problem. I think that we probably will get a good representation from the community through working with that subcommittee. I do think, though, as Councillor Jones mentioned to me earlier, that perhaps we should have some youth representation there of some degree, because us older folks tend to think in a different mindset. Okay, thanks.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Reid, there is a youth representative nominated in the terms of reference.
Oh, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Discussing, because it just seemed low, I was saying committees have the ability to form working groups where we can go and pitch ideas or ask questions of a very large group of youth. And if that doesn't already come out as part of the consultation, as part of the consultant's work, I should say.
Yep, through you, Mr Mayor. Look, when we say consultation, it's not necessarily just directed at adults. Yeah, like the intention is to try and engage with the youth of our community as well.
The school community there.
Yeah, well, I'd like to speak in recommendation of the motion. I'm really pleased to see that council is setting up a committee and will include some of the key stakeholders of the community. So I'd like to really thank them for doing it. I think that the inclusion of a member of the MPA who are Murray Bateman's key community consulting organisation and in particular the newly formed Recreation Facilities for Murray Bateman Working Group, which sits under the MPA umbrella. They've been doing great research into the playground matter and have been really successful with a survey. So I'm sure that the committee will find that incredibly useful. And so I think that even though it's one member of the MPA, I think that they're going to actually harness the views of lots of people and just bring it in with one person, which I think could make the whole process a lot quicker than having 25 people trying to bring in their individual views. And the inclusion of a youth, which I think is amazing, to just give that idea of what, you know, the people want right now in this moment and what kind of design looks good and what doesn't look good. And also just a general member of the community who could be anybody. They could be, you know, a mum, they could be a project manager, they could be a playground designer, they could be anyone who could come on board. So, and I think having 3 councillors on board who already have community, you know, consultations anyway, you know, to be able to continue that open discussion. I think it's actually a really robust committee, and it certainly doesn't look like maybe a normal committee, but it's also not the main street, Yass Mains. It's a playground in a site. Like for me, I just don't see why this is such a huge thing. And on that matter, through you, Mr. Mayor, a question to the CEO. You know, is it common practice for a council to set up a committee in regards to just building a playground? You know, if not, why has this been the case for Murray Bateman?
Through Mr. Mayor, we haven't always set up a committee, but we've always, certainly in more recent times, we've looked at innovative ways of engaging with the community. So, for instance, the redevelopment of the playground in Coronation Park, we actually used an innovative tool where there was a budget and there were different pieces of equipment that could be selected, and we asked the community to pick what combination they would like in terms of the playground. And that was a really useful way of trying to work out what the community wanted, and it was well participated in making that selection. That was a slightly different approach. The committee here is, as the Director of Planning said, is basically steering the project, providing a bit of a sounding board, using a consultant to not only deal with the direction from the committee, but also to engage with the broader community. This is not a committee that stays around forever. It stays around for the project. When the project is finished, then the group would disband, and then if there's another project, another playground project, they might come together again. But that'll be for a future decision. At this stage, it's very much project based, so it's got a start and a finish. At the end of it, the committee will disband, and hopefully by that stage, the committee will be able to sit back and reflect and say, yeah, we delivered a project that the community, or we helped deliver a project that the community wanted.
And sorry, just one more question, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning Environment. In your opinion, so the last information I had is when we received the invitation to apply for the grant, which was only received 3 weeks ago from us, even though we put pressure on. I was in contact with Kristen McVein's office for months and months and months, and we only just received this application three weeks ago. And I think now we've got 6 months to get that application in. When we're talking about getting the application in, does that mean we actually have to have a full-on design and a site and a location when we put that application in? Another question is, let's just, you know, for instance, we get this, if we adopt this tonight and we have a committee and, you know, we run the sessions with a consultant, have you got an estimated timeline? You know, I know that's hard to gauge, but I think, you know, it's really important for the community to know that something's going to get on the ground. You know, we're going to start to see something in the next kind of 12 months. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the question about the grant application on notice.
Sure.
Yeah. in terms of the timelines, look, not at this stage. The council staff have met and I've asked them to do some work around the constraints of the sites that were identified in the cost benefit analysis, particularly in relation to the land tenure of all those particular sites, because that's actually quite important. So I'm thinking the nominations will need to come back to council, so that's probably going to be, so probably May council meeting I would expect, and that we would meet sometime after that. But it depends on council allocating money for the project to move forward in terms of the designs, and essentially the consultant to be engaged. So we're doing some work now. There's a budget bid to come to council and the grant application has to go in. So as soon as we can take off, we will be working on it. Yeah, I'm keen to get it delivered.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Turner.
Mr. Mayor, this is really a simple motion. Every journey starts with one step. This was the one step we were going to take to provide the imprimatur for a committee in Murrum Bateman to be able to determine the composition of the committee, give it the terms of reference and get on with the job. We've danced around and round and round in circles, ever decreasing circles until we vanish up our fundamental. If this is going to happen when this committee is formed, then God help us. However, let's do the first step first and get the playground committee formed, the terms of reference adopted, the nominations sought from the community, and endorse the councillors who've already been nominated and get on with the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6.6 road repair priorities.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have an alternative to put forward to you, not terribly different, but I would like to just seek confirmation from our CEO that the readjustment cuttings are included in those segments that are listed, because I wouldn't know 24 from 57, but I know when I'm on the cuttings, it's pretty much a need. So I just wanted to check in.
The short answer is I don't have an
You
answer.
don't have an answer, okay?
Apologies. I did follow up, but I haven't got a response from it.
That's it.
I can. There's certainly remember that the sections of road that are in the table are the ones that were damaged by
Yes.
the rain events. The cuttings, it's highly likely that the cuttings are part of that.
Yeah.
More than likely because that's where damage to roads is generally caused if we've got landslips or anything like that.
Yes.
So I make that assumption, but I will follow it up and get a confirmation one way or the other.
Right, okay. So essentially, it's as the list is read, that we endorse that with the following inclusions. That further review of Glenroy Road segment, and I'm taking our submission from the public speaker as correct, as CH3550, for priority work under this program or our regular maintenance program. So once it's been inspected, we can determine which program it should be reviewed for. And that Mark Tree Road reconstruction be considered as a priority roads project as part of the 23 to 24 operational budget. So that's a secondary point, underneath this. So the first part is we're endorsing the list that we received as it is, and these further points, we've got to figure out which program the Glenroy Road goes into, and Mark Tree Road, we've already identified the segments that are the storm damage, but we've also had the petition stating that the whole thing needs reconstruction. So that's the gist of it, that we review that as a project, so we get our staff's input before we go off on our horse on that one.
Just through you, Mr. Mayor, Glenroy Road, as I've indicated, the normal maintenance program still applies. But what's on the list is just the sections that were flood impacted. So it makes some logic if both that routine maintenance and the flood repairs are done as one project. So I can certainly follow that up with the roads maintenance team.
Excellent. Through you, Mr. Mayor, why I put the option of the two projects there is that we were given the impression that this may have been overlooked as part of the assessment as being storm damage. So I just want to give our team the opportunity to go back, have a look, determine whether it's just regular maintenance that has been, sadly not done and it's eroded over time, or whether this section that he's talking about, where there's the incline and that damage, whether that's storm related.
No, my understanding is that no, it's not. That's part of routine maintenance.
Oh, okay.
So the storm damage component is what's been identified in the thing. It wasn't in the incline, but that is part of the routine maintenance.
Don't delete the whole thing.
No, just
Under our regular maintenance program, so we're going to take out the words that only the two words.
No, I'll just leave it as it is. Just leave it as
I'll
it
leave
is.
it as is.
Yeah,
Okay.
leave it as
All
it is.
Happy.
Just providing some clarity. That's
Okay.
all.
Fantastic.
Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, look, I was going to actually put forward a foreshadowed motion, which, and I'm not sure,
I haven't got a seconder. Sorry. Point of order.
You got two over there.
There you go. Bang bang.
Three.
I'll take three. Thank you.
Councillor Burgess.
sure it's not a committee. Look, I was going to have a foreshadowed motion because as I said, I was at the Meet the Candidates last Thursday over at Gundaroo, and Mark Trade did come up in a big way, and one person made the point that they've been promised for 70 years to have the road done after World War II, and they got a little bit started and then that was it. So we've been waiting for 70 years.
Who made the promise? Did we get his name?
No.
Last 10 minutes.
No.
The Mayor of Gunning.
Conversation at the pub.
Probably what was that one?
The Mayor of
Gunning. Mayor of Gunning, sure. Well, all right, okay, so we can blame Gunning. Okay.
They inherited it.
Yeah, I was going to just sort of say that I think I was going to push forward for an urgent full assessment of the condition of Mark Tree Road be undertaken and a report and action plan be reported back to the council. I'm just not sure, what you've suggested at the moment in your thing is basically sort of saying, it's going to be included. But we really need, I think we sort of need some sort of assessment of the quality of this road overall. And one of the things I did notice, I think, with some of the DAs, there's a number of DAs out on that road, more than I would have expected. So it's obviously an area that's being developed, and I just wonder whether, is it implicit in what you've got there that there would be some overall assessment? Thank you.
It's through you, Mr. Mayor. You have an asset management plan that lists our approach, our broad approach to managing road infrastructure. There is a mechanism there to prioritise roads. The inspections that have been made in recent months are largely about flood damage, not about the asset management priorities, because that's work that's been done to some extent. I don't disagree, looking at some of the photos, that Mark Tree Road requires reconstruction, but we won't be able to use flood damage money for that reconstruction work. That has to come out of your asset management bucket, which is not very, very deep at the moment. But certainly that's something that we need to do, and as we've done with some other roads, we can have a look at chance of some additional grant money for that. There seems to be two parties running around at the moment promising lots of money for local road projects. So again, if that's after the election, if that's an option, then we can potentially look at that as a source of funding for the road upgrade, as distinct from the road flood damage.
Thank you.
Sorry, no, Councillor Burgess.
I'd like to say that Mayor would have been Dr. Barber. Gunning, council, because he was in there after the war. There's a lot of other meetings after that. That road is terrible. It's all rock sticking up like that. You're driving over rock because the grader drivers got nothing to grade. There's just bush leaves and a few rocks out of the gutter. And there's been a lot of subdivision out there. Gunningshire of it, heaps going at Belston Road that should never have been let go, but it's done. Dr. Moran used to be at Murray Bateman Winery there, one of them wineries at Murray Bateman. He bought all that country up out there and he subdivided the whole lot of it. And then the others, now they're splitting the blocks in two. So there's more and more people coming out there, and there's a lot of people out there. The Bushfire Brigade, we won't go that way, we've got to go around the other way to come back up the hill. And the Shire boundary, as far as I know, is right down at Collector, and it comes all the way up the hill, and then it goes along the Collector Road we call going to Gunning, and it goes back onto Mountain Ridge, or what are you going to call it, down there. But something needs doing with that road, it's shocking. And there's flood damage, some of it should be fixed up. There's some bad places, there's little places like that to drive through. I was out there with a truck there, it was horrible.
Certainly.
In response to Councillor Cameron's question about the timeline and is this going to be urgent, well, we've got a budget workshop 2 weeks into April, that's next month. So I haven't given the team a lot of time to go out, assess the road and get back to us on where this sits in the priority. So, we've got under a month before you'll get an answer as to how much it's going to cost and how we're going to fit this into the budget.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay, everyone happy? I'll put the motion, all those in favour? Those against, declare the motion carried.
Sorry, just through you, Mr. Mayor, I did send an update on the bridge at Illong Road as well today.
Thank you.
So April 11, April 11, the contractor's looking at starting.
Oh, great, thank you.
March, yeah, good.
Okay, 6-7, heavy vehicle permit update. Councillor Burgess, have a seconder. Councillor Turner. Any discussion?
And just a comment through you, Mr. Mayor, something to take away whenever we're in the room with the road engineers again, and if I had a crystal ball, I would have asked them the last time. I get a sense of what they're ready for us to tick and flick as to which roads should be always approved for. But what I don't get a feel for is where they think we should be pulling back, that our roads are too damaged for these types of permits to be allowed. So I think we're all clear on what they're happy to approve, but not too sure on where is the frog in the hot water, so to speak. Like when is too many permits on a particular road too much? And as they note, the vehicles are getting heavier. And I appreciate when we're doing these permits that we're actually helping some of our local businesses deliver on a lot of their goals as businesses, because we are in a unique position between Melbourne and Sydney, and haulage is part of Yass's history. But I would like to know where the pressure points are and what we should be pulling back on, or noting that we need further roadworks on these areas, and who else can we how can we apply for grants, particularly that are heavy haulage routes, that kind of thing.
Mr. Mayor, there is a 3-year maximum period for certain types of vehicles, so there is an opportunity to review on a regular basis. That's the first thing. The second thing is that grant funding at the moment for roads are dependent on them being freight roads. That seems to attract the funding because they're looking at economic benefits and multipliers from that. So so again, if we identify our freight routes, and that means that we're in position to be able to get some of that grant money that is dependent on it being a freight route. So the roads that we restrict freight on are the roads that are unlikely to receive grant funding under the current models that are out there at the present time. So I would be expecting even with this framework that the staff will be looking at the condition of the road and the purpose of that road in terms of whether vehicles should be allowed on, some of these larger vehicles should be allowed on those roads or not. Just remembering that some vehicles, even a load limit, they might be over the load limit, but if they live on that road or they're delivering to that road, they're actually allowed to bypass the load limit in any case.
Questions answered, thank you.
Okay, happy to vote? I'll put the motion, all those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6.8, female friendly community sport facilities, lighting upgrade program. There's a recommendation. I'd like to move it. Councillor Potham, Councillor Jones. Any questions, any discussion?
I'd just like to note that we are allocating this money in our operational plan of budget, but in the following motion to come, I don't believe we should be attempting to allocate another grant to this, but I'll discuss it in that particular item. So I think we just need to look at that and go, yes, we're putting that into our operational budget, and that's going to be money that comes out of our.
Everyone clear on that? Yes. I'll put the motion then. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6.9, local roads and community infrastructure grant. Phase 4 funding.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, this is the report that Councillor Jones was just referring to.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose that we do it as is, except for assign the 116,000 to the Category 1 Murray Bateman Playground project.
Conflict of, do you have a seconder?
Never duly received.
Sorry? Do we have a seconder?
Mike's got his hand up there.
Right, thanks. Councillor Reid. Okay, discussion?
So what have we got at the moment? We've got a full motion there at the moment, have we?
No,
Is it amended, is it?
that motion
That is the
is up on
motion.
the board there is what Councillor Jones has moved. So no contribution to the Victoria Park lighting. So the idea of that 116,000 was to cover that contribution in the previous report we've just dealt with. So the idea would be that that lighting will be funded as a budget allocation in your upcoming budget. That's what you've just resolved. So what Councillor Jones has indicated, if that's already been funded for from general rate revenue in next year's budget, then that frees up this particular fund or this grant by the tune of 116,000 and suggesting that goes to the Category 1 playground in Murray Bateman. That's what the motion is at the moment. Is there a seconder for that motion? Yes, by Councillor Reid.
Yep. Councillor Cameron.
Right, okay, I was going to, and this relates to a question that I asked, which is 8.3 in your agenda, about the Main Street Committee. And I was actually, I would like to move an amendment to what's up there. And I based this amendment on the fact that we have to make hard choices. And I think we were talking the other day about budgets and special rate variations and a couple of other things about we have to make hard choices. And I was going to suggest that we make a hard choice. And I wanted to, the amendment that I have is that $450,000 be used to get the Yass Main Street Master Plan up and running. So to take out the words Yass Memorial Hall Stage 2 of upgrade and drainage works to then read 450,000, no, whoops, too much,
We're just
playing with it.
So is this a foreshadowed motion or is he speaking to
no,
my
it's
motion?
putting it as an amendment at the moment.
Bit like yours.
So the-
No, so point of order, because I put a motion, that was not an amendment.
All right, okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, another councillor is entitled to propose an amendment to the motion that you've put forward.
Absolutely, but my original motion was not an amended motion, it
No,
was
no,
a
no,
motion.
that's
Yeah.
correct. Absolutely correct.
All right, okay, sorry, I'm learning. We're talking about hard choices. I think most people would realise that I have an affinity with the Soldiers Memorial Hall, and it's great that we're getting stage 1 of being done and it's being currently done. It's great, it's great. However, when I got my answer back for 8.3, question with notice about the implementation of the Yass Main Street Master Plan and the open space strategy, I was a bit disappointed. In fact, I was quite disappointed that the way it reads is that we're not really doing much about getting the Yass Main Street Master Plan underway. And when we were talking about this recently, the figure was mentioned that we needed a project manager and we needed a detailed design brief to get this up and running. And the figure that was quoted was somewhere in the order of $400,000, which I don't think we're going to get very easily out of our current budget or through a grant sort of process. So I thought we needed to sort of act on this quickly, because I think people are getting disillusioned that nothing much is happening with the Yass Master Plan, and it could be like many other plans and just not get implemented in any meaningful way. So I'd like you to support the changes and I realise that from the Soldiers Memorial Hall Committee chairperson that he may be a bit disillusioned that I'm suggesting this, but I think we do have to make hard choices sometimes, and I think if we don't start moving on the Main Street Master Plan and possibly the Open Spaces Committee, then I think we may not be doing the work that the community is expecting us to do.
Just on a point of order, if I may, we haven't got a seconder to the amendment, and therefore we shouldn't be discussing it until we get a seconder. If anybody wants, I believe that's the case.
You seconded the motion.
Original motion.
So sorry,
So Councillor Jones, Councillor Reid as the original motion. Councillor Cameron's proposed an amendment and the second.
All right, okay. Do we have,
And it hasn't yet been seconded, so
That's right.
we have a second?
if he doesn't get seconded, it lapses. Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can respond, I'd just like to show you, this is Wingham. They got $1 million grant for their Main Street project. It was one of the projects we went, wow, why didn't we get that? We applied for, I think it was like $116,000 for some electrical boxes, we couldn't even get that because we didn't have a master plan, right? So don't be disillusioned that we can't go and get grants, and what state or federal politician is not going to walk down and say, look what I did for Yass down on their Main Street. So don't be disillusioned by that. There are opportunities, and I think the Main Street will happen. In the meantime, Memorial Hall, we're going to lose it. We're doing what we can. That's why we shifted that big 700K block of funds. We went, this is going to hurt. There are so many projects we could be spending on this, but we're going to fix the roof. Now we've got to deal with the water that's coming not from the top but from the bottom, and the subsidence and the drainage works. And I know that you're passionate about drainage when it comes for development. Well, this is a development that is at the very core of our Main Street,
we don't get that fixed, we're going to lose that grand old building. And we've all been told by the community time and time again, if it happens on our watch, I would never forgive myself. And this is our opportunity to use a windfall we didn't see coming. This is fantastic. Let's use it. Let's get that job done so that we can say we saved it. Okay. Now, what I don't see in this, which is why I've adjusted it, is Murray Bateman, and they are crying out for infrastructure. They have got a gold little building there in terms of the rec hall, but it's well beyond the use. It gets slammed every weekend and during the day. So many organisations use it. The MPA is asking for an increase in its maintenance budget of 10K just to keep the thing rolling along. But they're just absolutely crying out for infrastructure. You know, I've been to the park, the little Hercules Park there.
It's not a park.
Yes, sorry.
Point of order.
I stand corrected. And it isn't a park. You know, I had to put a potty in the back for primary school aged children because there's nowhere to go to the toilet. So we need to get on with that job, and we need to throw some money at it because we know that the federal grant is not going to be enough, and we know that we are going to have to contribute something to that. Let's try and stockpile little bits as we can so we're not hammering away at our reserves. And the community, through its MPA working group for that playground, have already stated, we know it's not going to be enough, but we still need a Category 1 playground. We'll do what fundraising we can. Let's give them every opportunity to make that Category 1 park happen. Even in stages, it's going to need more than the federal budget, federal grant that's been given.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. You were speaking in support of your
Yes.
motion.
Yes.
And I think you need to be debating the
Mr.
amendment.
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr.
I
Mayor, if I may.
would put that down as a speech against the amendment.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, we're dealing with the amendment first, obviously.
That's
As a
yes.
protocol. And as you would expect, I will rise to my feet. The Memorial Hall is 100 years old. For 40 of those 100 years, we have successfully plundered any opportunity to spend money on that hall, to spend it somewhere else. For Councillor Cameron to suggest that it be taken away from the Memorial Hall this time is absolutely beyond belief. He knows the state of the hall. We all know the state of the hall. The community knows the state of the hall. We plundered $750,000 out of it in my last time on council. I will not see it happen again this time round. This is absolutely the worst possible amendment I have ever seen in my life. I understand Councillor Cameron's wanting to do it, but I urge all of you to vote against it. It is absolutely criminal. My friend, criminal.
Fairly strong words, Councillor Turner. Councillor Potter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to speak on behalf of the Memorial Hall and against the amendment that Councillor Cameron has put forward. I was quite shocked and appalled at all the photographic evidence that came through in the recent report, and I knew there was problems with the hall and I knew it needed some maintenance. However, the extent of the maintenance is absolutely appalling, and I felt quite ashamed, even as a councillor, to see the state of, you know, this great old dame in the main street, and particularly like enjoying her 100th year here and a really, you know, grassroots part of our town. And it's just absolutely embarrassing to see the state of it. And I agree, I will not see that money redirected anywhere. And I do hope we can get, I'm also very passionate about the Main Street Master Plan, and I do hope we can go for some funding, and I'm also part of that committee, and I do hope we can get the ball rolling on that. However, this to me is not the time or the place, and I will defend that along with Councillor Turner to the hills of back. Thank you.
Go on. Councillor.
I'm going to speak in favour of the amendment. I was really going to take the money out of the gravel resheathing. Maybe I should have done that. Yes, I know. I didn't want to take on Councillor Burgess. Yeah. I didn't want to get out of the room alive. Look, I want to first of all thank Councillor Jones for reminding us that she did play a significant part in getting the $700,000 towards the current stage one that's happening at the moment. I suppose when we're talking about grants and getting extra money, I believe, I think I saw something in your good paper. Did I see it in the paper? I'm not sure. But there was a photo of a certain Minister of Local Government promising 1.1 million for the Memorial Hall when she gets re-elected and the government gets re-elected as well. And, you know, we can live in hope that maybe not only will the Liberal government be resurrected, but we might also get the 1.1 million. And I suppose I was thinking by the time, you know, the stage one is done, the 1.1 million will come through and we will be so much better off. So please support the amendment.
A win-win, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone happy?
Just may I? Yeah.
Councillor Reid.
I actually believe that fixing up the Memorial Hall is part of the Main Street Master Plan, because it is a vital part of the Main Street, and certainly the facade needs to be fixed. So yeah, I'm against the amendment as it stands.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Against the amendment.
That's the amendment?
That's it for.
For the amendment, Did you, do I have to vote for? Yeah.
It looks like you're on your own, councillor.
What's new?
But, you know, I think you put up a good argument.
Well, I think we
I think it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Faint heart never won fair lady. It doesn't look like you're going to win the Main Street this time, Maria. Although, as Councillor Reid has said, it is part of the Main Street
Yeah, okay.
and an
Point
integral
taken.
part.
The crown jewel of the Main Street.
It is, yeah, it is, absolutely. Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
The amendment.
The amendment. Those in favour, Councillor Cameron. Those against? The rest. Okay, we're back to the original motion now.
Don't arrest me.
Councillor Jones.
Let's go straight to, I've
Okay.
said everything I need to say. It's all good.
Put the motion, all those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried.
Thank you. Please forgive me, I have a pressing commitment.
20 minutes late.
Yeah.
Okay, 6:10, council owned land, Gravilli Close, Murrumbake. There is a recommendation. Councillor Cameron.
President.
Moved?
Yeah.
You have a second. Councillor Abbey. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. 6:11, the investment and borrowings report. I'd like to move the recommendation. Councillor Potham. Councillor Burgess. Motion, all those in favour? Those against, declare the motion carried. 6:12, quarterly budget review statements. I'd like to move. Councillor Abbey. Councillor Potter. Any questions?
Through you, Mr Mayor, just would like to ask the question, on the last page of the document, you've got us about consultancies. Could someone, figure about 99,000, 100,000, could someone just outline the consultancies, give me a flavour for the consultancies that we used?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Is that in the attachment or the?
Yeah, attachment, yeah,
Oh, sorry.
last page of the attachment.
You haven't got the page number, have you, by any chance?
No, it's just the very last page. Have mine if you like. Just again, there's just no breakup of what the consultants were. for consultancies work?
We'll try and take that on notice and get a breakdown of that, but the consultancies, anything from where we engage someone directly to provide us with advice, so a solicitor, for instance. But it also would include some of the contractor positions that we already have within the organisation to cover vacancies. So there'll be a staff component, for instance, in the planning area. There's a number of consultants there providing advice to us to get through the DAs that we're doing. So there is a people component, and there are some where where we're engaging companies to deliver a service on our behalf because we don't have the staff to do that service. But I will certainly endeavour to get a breakdown for you and provide that to you out of session if that's of help.
Happy with that, Councillor Abbott?
Yes, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cameron?
Yeah, on the attachment sheet, there is something there called other than by QBRS. I don't understand what that means. No, I've got mine here. Do you want to pass that? Other than by QBRS?
It's
QBRS is the
quarterly budget review statements.
Right. Okay, so in the yellow it's saying other than by the QBRS. So are we allowed to do that? To make those sort of amendments without going through a quarterly budget review statement situation at council?
That's the quarterly budget review for the period to the 31st of December.
Yeah, that's the second review, yeah.
So these would have been ones picked up throughout that quarter.
Right.
So council's made decisions on those. They've been included in the quarterly review as the yellow highlighted section.
I'm a little bit at loss to sort of understand why you have to put it in a different colour. Like what it seems to me as though if it was just part of the quarterly review, then you just put it in. It seems to be
We're highlighting the changes that have been made throughout the quarter,
right.
so that you're aware of what those changes are or reminded of what we've already decided.
All right.
That's how I'm interpreting that.
Oh, I'm just
We make decisions at every council meeting about, moving money around,
yeah.
and then they get picked up in the quarterly review. We highlight them for you so that you're reminded of what movements in and out of the budget are occurring.
Okay, and the second question relates to, I'll leave that with you, is I can't find a depreciation figure there, which is part of why we have a problem. And it would seem to me as though that we're missing a page. And maybe
Depreciation is usually done at the final end of year statements.
it's not part of the quarterly budget review, like sort of,
You don't review depreciation. Depreciation's a figure,
right,
and usually it's presented in the final statements at the end of the financial year.
okay, take your point there. So I'll make a couple of quick comments. Look, I think the main thing about this second quarterly budget review is that it does point out on page 1 of 3 that we've moved from a net operating result before capital items from 912,000 to 7.5 million. And one could describe that as a big black hole. I'm not sure whether that's the best expression, but it does seem to me that the financial situation is not good, and I may be being a bit polite there, that we've suddenly got this situation. And really, it's only being brought to our attention effectively 9 months after the end of the last financial year, which I find both the figure, the amount, and the fact that it's taken some time to be brought to our attention, disappointing. I think councillors should be disappointed that we have got to be, I think, in the future, far more on top of what the current financial situation looks like, and I'm not clear about where we are actually at the moment. Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm quite happy to get our financial team to meet with any councillors who've had those concerns. If you would like us to do that in terms of that, dealing with that particular issue. We could do it as a workshop, or we could give briefings to individuals or groups of councillors, depending on who's got concerns. Happy to make it a workshop, and everyone gets the same information. Okay.
Everyone happy?
Yes.
Okay, deal with that motion. Yes, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Cameron. 613 class action by Richmond Valley Council. Appeal update. Recommendation, Councillor Turner. Moved. Seconded, Councillor Abbey. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. 614. The Yass District Historical Society Archive Relocation Briefing. There is a recommendation.
Sorry. Can't see the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr.
Be noted. Councillor Turner, seconded. Councillor Potter. Any discussion, any questions? Councillor Cameron.
Yeah, look, I just want to note that the second report that's there, I think it was called something along the lines of the pre-insurance report or something along those lines, that report was undertaken after the eviction notice or the ask to leave notice was given to the Yass District Historical Societies. And I think in some ways that there's a sort of a suggestion that sort of is some sort of explanation of why the archives had to move, and I don't think we can link those two together as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. Mark Tree Road, Gundaroo, petition. Urgent repairs. There is a recommendation.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it was presented from just noting, but if it dealt with the issue of Mark Tree Road or
Overtaken with Councillor Jones.
That's right. I'll move it. We know.
Councillor Burgess. Councillor Abbey. Put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion carried.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move 616 and 617 be moved into confidential.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cameron. Questions with notice. 8.1. 8.2 and 8.3, there are responses. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, the executive team, whoever that may be. Thank you for giving the detailed information about our current situation, which, you know, is a bit of hard reading, I think, in the fact that we basically have, you know, a large number of vacancies, and of which I think somebody mentioned about 40 vacancies, of which about 19 are filled by contractors or consultants or whatever. So it's not a really great situation. I suppose when I was looking at this question about redundancies, I was thinking of a couple of things that usually when you've got a lot of staff shortages, you don't usually go through a process of doing redundancies as well. That sort of, you know, when you think about it, is that exacerbating the situation? It also sort of reminds me that, you know, a figure of $100,000 has been spent in redundancy payouts for a very small number of people. And I suppose the question I'm thinking to myself is that value for money? I don't know. Perhaps not. But anyway, I'm sure we can get some sort of answer on that. The only question that I have with that, I think it is interesting to know that that's the situation we're in, and it does have an implication, as been brought up here a number of times, in delivery of service delivery to the community, and it is impacting on that, and that's a concern. The only question I have there is, do we have exit interviews when people leave the organisation? A lot of organisations do that in order to see how we can improve the organisation overall. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the short answer to that last one is yes, we do exit interviews where staff are prepared to sit down and have an exit interview. It's not mandatory, but that's something we offer every staff member to do an exit interview. The redundancy figure in there is largely entitlements that the employees were entitled to anyway. Untaken annual leave is a component of that. And there is provisions under the award for payments made in lieu of, payments made for years of service. Of those 3 redundancies, 2 of the staff members had only been here for a couple of years, so that was a negligible amount of redundancy payment. One was certainly a long-term staff member. There was another thing that you mentioned there is that we do, as with any redundancy, we do consider the skills of the staff member and whether there's any comparable position within the organisation. The difficulty here is that our biggest vacancies are around our road construction crews. The people that we lost through those redundancies didn't have any of those skills to be able to work in that area, so we couldn't redeploy them. But that's the first thing you look at when you're considering redundancies is, are there any other positions within the organisation where there's comparable skills that they could actually undertake? And in this particular instance, no, they weren't. The vacancies were in finance team and the road crew are the 2 biggest areas where we had some issues. Planning is the other one. And none of those staff had skills in any of those areas. We sit down with any staff who are looking at redundancies, and that's the first thing that we look at. And but it's the choice of those people whether they believe that those positions that they're being offered are acceptable to their skill set. And if they say no, it's not, then we have no option but to go down the redundancy path in those cases. So it's certainly something we don't deal with lightly, and any redundancy is done in accordance with all the provisions of the award. We must do that.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? So with currently 42 vacancies out of the 177, 18 have been vacant for 3 months or more, and they're filled by temporary or staff or contractors. Currently 19 positions at various stages of recruitment. So that doesn't add up to the 42 vacancies though. Does that mean that staff within out of the 177, some are doing 2 roles, and
Generally not.
no,
Generally, we just don't do the work.
that role is just not happening at
Except
that
in the
point in time.
executive.
Yeah, sometimes people are doing
Except for the
roles,
executive.
sometimes they are.
The issue is very simple, is that if we can't get a person to do 2 jobs.
Right, okay.
This is very interesting. Quite enjoying this, Chris.
Throw it back.
It just means that role, the work is not done in that role. But there might be issues. So, for instance, in the governance area where we don't have a staff member at the present time, if a governance issue is raised, like a GIPA request for access to information or freedom of information, or a code of conduct matter or whatever, that they have to be dealt with because there are timeframes around those. So certainly the executive team are at the moment covering those ones where we can. But if it's a Parks and Gardens person, it just means that they're not doing that work that person would do. So that's the reason. There is also a lag, remember, because recruitment is, and this is why the numbers don't match, it takes people to run the recruitment process. And you've got to be conscious of their workload. So if we've got 19 positions in the process of recruitment, that's a significant workload for the HR team of basically 3 people. So recruitment involves advertising, culling of applications, reviewing position descriptions. The interview is probably the easiest part of the process, and then there's a selection at the end of it. And we've had some varying experiences where we've gone through a recruitment process and we've got no suitable candidates. So that means we have to start over again. So that work has to repeat. Yeah. So it's also a case of the workload and the capacity that we can undertake with the small team of HR, the HR team that we've got. So that's why there's a bit of a lag between people leaving the organisation and recruiting. So we have to prioritise, and that's what we're doing at the present time. And as I say, with some positions where we're just not attracting candidates, which is challenging for the ones that remain in the organisation as much as it is for the work that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone's got any ideas on how we might improve our...
We could start doing some TikTok videos. Put it to the youth council.
I can say that we've tried.
The meeting's getting longer.
Sorry.
We've tried overseas recruitment, and that's caused a problem because we've had issues there with visa backlogs because of the 2-year delay. That's not helping. We've focused on trainees, and we certainly picked up some trainees to fill in some of the positions, and that's something we will continue to do because I'm a firm believer that we can get a trainee up to running and doing some basic stuff very, very quickly. There is a longer term investment in terms of their education, so that's something that we do commit to. As of yesterday, I signed off on a training recruitment program with the joint organisation for planners. And the idea there is to get people from this region to take up planning and get trained up so that they actually then can feed into the vacancies across the region for planners. So we're trying a lot of different things that we would not normally do. I've just signed off today on a case of a mechanic that has left. We've got a contractor in there that was for a term period, I've signed off on a variation to that contract to extend that period for that person. So we're doing lots of things where we're trying very hard to fill the vacancies that we can, but remembering we're competing against 127 other councils in New South Wales.
Okay. Where are we up to?
8.2.
As indicated the other night, one of the things that we mentioned in response to issues raised on this is that we're at the start of our asset management journey. We quickly, Director of Infrastructure and Assets developed some basic first draft asset management plans. And what we need to do on this journey is to refine those plans and ensure that they are feeding into financials better than what they are at the present time. And that's certainly something that we're working on. So that's part of the journey that we're on. Remembering that financial views can be different to the asset management plan views on what the purposes are. Our job is to try and make sure that they're talking to each other better than what they are at the present time. Most councils that are further down the track than this have got that under control better than what we have. But this is something that's just going to be a continuous improvement project for a number of years in terms of getting the asset management plans better refined and with better data.
Would this be a major task of the new engineer coming on board?
It will be one of many major tasks for the new engineer. That's why I think you've got asset management planning is a long-term thing. You don't get an instant response over the time. You're forever fine-tuning it and developing your planning. And there's lots of debates about how you tackle your asset liability. I won't say they're assets; they're actually liabilities. But anyway, the thing is that there are things with, like for instance on roads, you don't need to replace the road base when you're doing a road upgrade. The base is there. The land is there. You don't have to buy the land. It's already there. So those are things that you don't need to necessarily account for in terms of the actual work you need to put on into your asset to keep it maintained to a standard. So there's a fair bit of work that needs to be done on these asset management plans. And yes, it will be a task for the new director. In addition to that, it will be something that our asset managers will also be looking at, and we will also be looking at what our peers are doing in the industry. We won't be just reinventing the wheel, we'll be looking at what others are doing on this issue. So think of it as a long-term thing. We'll get better every year as we do this. And obviously rating the standard of assets is a continuous process. It's not just done once every year, it's done on a regular basis.
Okay. We'll move on to the minutes, council committees.
8.3.
8.3.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I understand why you've
Yeah.
moved over because it's been discussed.
Yeah, I'm happy. I made a point or two.
Okay. All right, we'll go straight on now then to the minutes of the committee. First one is the Local Emergency Management Committee. Councillor Turner, you have a seconder, Councillor Portman. Any discussion? Questions? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, those against, declare the motion carried. Minutes of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Councillor Councillor Potham, Councillor Burgess. Any discussion? I'll put the motion, all those in favour, those against, declare the motion carried. Minutes of the Canberra Region Joint Organisation Board meeting held on the 24th of February 2023. I'll move. Seconded, Councillor Cameron. Any questions? I'll put the motion, all those in favour? Those against? Declare the motion carried. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Second, Councillor Burgess. We go into closed session.